Now it's recorded. So tonight's session is being recorded and we'll be sending out the replay to you tomorrow. We'll have several Q&A breaks. So if a question pops into your head, don't hold back, just type it in the chat and we'll go over it together during the breaks. We also have some fun polls throughout the session, so be ready to weigh in and share your thoughts. This is going to be a jam-packed 90 minutes and we're so glad that you've chosen to spend your evening growing with us, figuratively and literally. Before we pass the mic to Tam, I would like to officially introduce her to you. Tam runs Prairie Gardens, a family farm in Sturgeon County that's been growing strong since 1956. She and her daughter manage 35 acres of you-pick strawberries, vegetables, apples, cherries, and pumpkins, turning their farm into a vibrant destination for education, festivals, and farm-to-table experiences. With over 40 years of industry experience, Tam has helped shape the future of agritourism in Alberta and continues to be a passionate voice for our farming community. Now, we'd love to get to know you a little better. If you haven't already, please pop into the chat and tell us your name, where you're joining from, and whether you're a commercial grower, home gardener, or just exploring an idea. Don't be shy. Pop into the chat. Hello, Dylan from High Prairie. About to move out into the country and would like to explore semi-commercial opportunities. Awesome. Caitlin from Cold Lake, just exploring an idea. And hello, Emmy here for Food Upcycling Engagement Center. We give value to your access. Very cool slogan. Welcome, welcome indeed. Okie dokie. So now let's dig in. Let's dig in into part one of our Strawberry Masterclass. Here's Tam Anderson with tonight's presentation. Enjoy.
Well, good evening, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here on a spring morning with strawberry planting just a few days away. And just thought a review is sometimes good and also really interesting to share what we know. We have been growing strawberries on our farm since 1984, so that's a long time. And I've pretty much seen every possible season come and go. And we're excited this year that we are starting with a bit of moisture, and we are growing up north of Edmonton, so that's a good place to start. So we'd like to welcome you to the Strawberry Masterclass. So a little bit about us in the Alberta Farm Fresh Producers Association. Our mission is to foster a vibrant farm direct marketing industry, providing Albertans with access to fresh, healthy food and farm and agritourism experiences. And a visit to a strawberry farm is an agritourism experience. And our mission is that the Alberta Farm Fresh Producers Association works hard to connect local farmers to consumers. We support a profitable and sustainable farm direct marketing industry through advocacy, education, promotion, and cooperation. And we find in Alberta that our industry is quite small, and we really, really do love sharing what we know with other growers and welcoming new growers into our flock. So I always am quite interested to see how we are doing out there in the world. And to be a member of the Alberta Farm Fresh Producers Association, usually you would sell farm direct. So you would sell your strawberries directly to the consumer. You might sell them at a farmer's market, but more likely you would sell them directly at your farm. And you might also offer other products. So you might sell strawberry jam, or you pick vegetables, grains, beef, or even agritourism experiences. And the agritourism experiences in my experience have been just something that is a response to what the consumer is looking for. And when they come to the farm and they're going to pick strawberries, they often ask, what else can we do? And so that's how it grows. And strawberries are actually one of the best draws in the world to get people to your farm or to your booth at a farmer's market. They're irresistible, and it's something about our cool evenings, but when the plants take a while to get the strawberries to the stage where they're ripe, they've gained so much sugar in them. They're so sweet and so juicy that they're unmistakably Albertan and a true, real strawberry flavor. And the juice is running down your chin, and the strawberry kids that are picking are all covered in strawberry juice. You know you've done your job well, and people really love them, so it's worthwhile to do. So tonight we're just going to cover some grower tips, some basics on site selection, the actual types of berries that we grow, and some insights into the U-Pick strawberry business. And on our farm, we've had 1 acre of strawberries, and at one point we were growing 12 acres of strawberries, and now we're down to about 3 or 4 acres of strawberries. And that's a very manageable size for a small family farm, and it really does bring in a nice little bit of income. So strawberry returns, you can expect per acre about 3,200 to 7,500 pounds of strawberries, with the low being 0 and the high even higher than that if it's possible. Typically, strawberries produce about 1 pound of strawberries for every plant. So the 0 comes in when you get a late spring frost or a hailstorm, and then you have nothing. Or you can get way over 7,500 pounds if it's the perfect growing season, because you're planting about 11,000 plants an acre. And so you potentially could actually harvest between 11 and 12,000 pounds an acre. And the price range nowadays is $35 for a 4-liter pail to $25. I would like to say that the market will support $35, and they really are so exceptionally higher quality than anything that you'll find in a box store or at the grocers that, if people aren't sure and they come out and taste them, there's no complaints. So what you are looking at potentially is between $22,000 and $52,000 an acre in returns. So the game changer for us, at least, has been agritourism. And agritourism makes it so that we can charge an admission for folks that come to our farm. And the range across the industry is between $5 and $25 a person. And obviously, the experience is quite different in that price range. At $5 a person, sometimes we just call that a grazing fee. And as a U-Pick operation, many times people will bring their families and everybody at least has to sample one berry. And we always joke, oh yeah, no problem, taste one. We're going to weigh you on the way out. And so we discourage active eating of strawberries and en masse. But the kids can't resist, and they do taste so wonderful. So typically, if you had an acre of strawberries producing and you had people come to pick at your farm, you would expect somewhere between 300 and 900 people to come and pick an acre of strawberries. And that gives you a range of between $1,600 and $20,000 more per acre if you charge admission. So this is a great way to really we cover your costs for insurance, for wages, for marketing, and it's a bit of a risk management strategy as well. If you have poor weather, or you do have a hailstorm or frost, you can think of a few other activities, and people will still like to come to the farm and have a tour of your farm and your strawberry patch, whether or not they can pick strawberries. So it gives you some elbow room and flexibility to hedge your bets, and make sure that you don't have all of your strawberries, as it were, in one basket. It also gives you the opportunity to operate beyond your picking season and to expand into other crops, with strawberries being the main draw. And so then you time other crops to be ready at the same time as your strawberries. So things like zucchinis and peas and baby potatoes, maybe greenhouse tomatoes, are all crops that people are interested in, and would like to purchase while they're out picking strawberries. So it gives you that ability to upsell in other crops. Or they might just like to come for a picture of a sunflower. And so there's your admission again. So on the flip side, the cost of production um, are also quite high, of course. It's a very labor-intensive crop. And so your variable costs per acre would include things like the actual bare root plants that you plant, the weeding that you do, fertilizers, sprays, your liability insurance, which is quite important if you're having people on your farm. And those costs range between $6,000 and $7,000 an acre, and they could be much higher depending on your efficiency at weeding and how much you're paying your weeding crew. And then, of course, you have your capital costs, which you amortize over the life of your farm. And land costs, tractors, equipment, irrigation are all part of those expenses. And that is really something that you have to sit down and work out, because it definitely costs money to buy land in agriculture in Alberta. So at this point, I thought we'd just stop for a second and just see if there's any questions that you'd like to add into the chat stream, and then we'll go from there. So go ahead and type in your questions if you have some, and I'll give it a minute or two and see what we've got here. So what we found in a lifetime of being involved in the industry and having strawberries is that in all of our years of operating, so it's nearly 40 years of selling strawberries, we've had 1 year of hail and 1 year, which was actually last year, of a late frost that took out the strawberry blossoms. So in 40 years, we've lost 2 crops. Which is not bad odds. And there is insurance out there, but it's very expensive for hail and crop insurance. And so we just decide that we have diversified enough that if we lost a strawberry crop, it wouldn't be the end of the world. And that's our approach to some of the risk management that goes into it.
Sam, I have a question for you. You said you were talking about the juiciness of strawberries. Which type of strawberry is your favorite?
They're all my favorites when they're in production. But I would have to say that they're favorites for different reasons, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes as we get into our varieties. But strawberries is a very subjective flavor, and I've often had strawberry taste tests. And 1 year we were at a market and we had nobody. We had lots of people tasting, but we had the Galloping Gourmet, if you remember him from early days of television food shows. And I was actually in Edmonton, and he came to eat my strawberries at my booth. And I was like, I have lived long enough. The Galloping Gourmet has eaten my strawberries. And I was like, so what do you think? And he's like, oh my God, they're so good. They are just, like he said, the perfect 1 day strawberry. The juice is running down my chin. He said, I can't get enough of them. What a marvelous crop you grow. So
That's
that's
an
there.
awesome story.
Yeah.
I have Rick Barr that's asking a question. Does the entrance fee that you charge for admission slash picking strawberries also give them access to see your whole farm?
Yeah, so we actually do these things in different ways depending on where our crop is that year. strawberries are a rotation crop, and they go from field to field across the whole farm. And so sometimes they're at the farm where people can visit the petting farm and have a train ride and do all of that. And then in which case we charge them a full admission, but we give them a discount as a thank you for them picking our strawberries. And so it's, quite a good deal for them. Other times we're out in a field that's far away from all of those things, and then we just charge a basic fee, like $5. And that is a ride on the hay ride out to the strawberry field. We charge for our buckets, so we call it a rental fee, because we'd like our buckets returned to us, and we charge $2 for that, and everybody's like, fine, add it on. I'll bring your pail back next time. Some people even want to buy the pail so they can go berry picking themselves in the bush when the Saskatoon season is on, or they have raspberries or something at home. But so we charge for the buckets, we charge for admission, and it varies. And some people charge an admission, but you can, get it back if you pick the berries. So, there's a few different ways to approach it, and it's always good to understand that if you charge an admission, you're now not just in the berry business, but also the experience economy, which means that people have expectations. And you do need to make sure that you meet those expectations so that they feel good about having supported your farm with their admission.
So that's when customer service becomes super important.
Yeah, exactly. And we will talk about how many plants per acre, and it depends on which varieties of strawberries they are. So I'll come back to that.
Awesome. And Dylan, what are some of those good early stage diversification activities, other crops that help hedge against the risks of strawberries or provide that experience you just mentioned, and or to put into rotation with?
Yeah, so we really like to grow crops that complement strawberry season. And so we will grow the zucchini because they're ready at the same time, peas because you can have them ready at the same time, and baby potatoes, and in our greenhouses. So we're risk management with growing some crops under cover. We'll grow early cucumbers and tomatoes. And the other thing that people absolutely love are baby carrots. And so if you get carrots seeded in the fall, you can be digging carrots by mid-July, which is when the strawberries start to be ready, at least for us in Edmonton. And that changes across the province. If you're in southern Alberta, your strawberries are going to be ready at least 2 or 3 weeks earlier than ours are here in Edmonton. And if you're in Peace River, your strawberries are going to be later still than ours are at Edmonton by another week or two.
Awesome. Let's move on to the next slide. Thank you so much for the questions.
You're very welcome. So we get down to the basics of strawberries. When we get plants in the spring, they come in as a bare root nursery plant, and we order strawberries very often, in fact, every single year, because they don't last forever. And we find by year 3 to 5, they're starting to decline in production somewhat. They pick up viruses, which is natural, and the Rosaceae family, which is all of the flowers and trees that grow native in Alberta to us, like the Saskatoons and the wild roses, for starters, just pass these viruses around. And so the berries start to get smaller and smaller, and they're not worth harvesting. Maybe they are worth harvesting, but they're not worth weeding anymore. And so at that point, we plow them under and plant a new field. So every year we plant a field to replace a field that we're plowing down. So these plants arrive frozen. They come either in from Nova Scotia or from California, where there are nurseries that supply virus indexed plants. And those are the best ones to start. And you'll see my little cryptic notes like this end down and that end up, because sometimes it's hard to tell. And if you've got a new planting crew, you want to make sure they go top side up in the ground. And it is a lovely membership benefit with the Alberta Farm Fresh Producers Association, and we've relied on them heavily all these years. for not only the plants, but also some of the peer networking that we learned from other growers, which ones they've had best success with. Okay. The next part of the plant is the root. And the root is actually the most important part of the plant in many respects. So 90% of the roots are actually in the top 6 inches of the soil. And the very basic information is roots above ground die and roots in waterlogged soil die. And so if you can avoid those two situations, you should do quite well with your berries. We find with our planting crew, because we have students come and help us plant every season, it really takes some close monitoring to make sure that it's done properly. And you'll see there's a black and white illustration of, roots planted too high. So if you can even see even just the shoulders of the roots, that plant is too high. And if they're down too deep and the actual crown of the plant is buried too low, then the plant takes too much energy to leaf out and keep going. And so the perfect situation is just right halfway up the crown. So strawberry crowns, here's a close-up of it. So you'll see the roots, and then you'll see that stem in the middle, and the leaves come from there. And not only the stem has the leaves, but it has also all the flower buds in it, and the runner buds. So it's a really important part of the plant. And the correct depth absolutely matters. You have to get it right. An interesting fact that you may not realize is that plants actually do better with chilling temperatures. And so if we're planting in the spring, and that's why I'm excited in the field, it's much better to plant them now while the soil temperatures are cool and it's kind of hovering in that hopefully 7-degree mark. And that really encourages the plants to get going, for the roots to get going, and then the crowns come later and all the leaf. And so that cool temperature really, really does promote maximum growth. And then again, here's another illustration of where that crown needs to be. So if the roots are at the soil surface or above, it's too shallow. If it's halfway up the stem, it's right. And if it's to the point where it's deeper than that, then it's getting too deep. So your goal is to create runners, and this is if you're growing strawberries that produce in the summer. Sometimes they're referred to as June-bearing plants, but oftentimes we'll say they're July bearers, because in our area, they're only 1 year in 40, they're ready to pick in June, and more often than not, they're ready to pick about the 10th of July. And so each of those little runners has a daughter plant, and each daughter plant actually sets roots and then sets another runner, and you might get 6 or 7 little plants from that mother plant and daughter plant, and then eventually you might get up to 60 daughter plants. And each of those plants will produce a pound of fruit. So something that we spend a fair amount of time on in the spring, we call it setting the runners. So as we're going through hand weeding, we'll actually take each one of those little runners, and as soon as the daughter plant starts and there's roots, we'll just throw a plot of dirt on it to stop it from blowing around in the wind. And that way it actually does set roots and then makes the subsequent daughter plants. Day neutral production is a little different. And so day neutral strawberries produce strawberries all season long, and they fruit and flower in waves across the summer. They're called day neutrals because they are not reliant on the day length to set their flower buds, which is what the other type of strawberry does. And so as soon as you plant them that season, you'll have strawberries to harvest. And if you're very keen, you'll cut any runners off, because then it focuses all of its energy into the berry production. Excuse me. And so the more you cut the runners off, the more berries you'll get. And and then that really depends on you and how much time you have and your labor costs. So if it's something you do yourself, I would do it, but I wouldn't pay somebody to do it because I feel like I wouldn't get enough return from that particular activity. Well, we're moving into site selection. And location, location, location is always the adage when you're thinking about planting strawberries. The first thing you need and that you have to invest in is good shelter belts and windbreaks. And that can be both of the permanent varieties. So you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner a shot there of a windbreak in the distance, but they're also planting corn in every 20 rows or so, and the corn stalks will hold the snow in place and the straw in place for the winter season. Access to water is critical, and the strawberry itself is 80% water. So if it's a hot, dry season and you have no irrigation, your berry size will reflect that heat and the lack of water. Access to great soil is important, and berries really like sandy loam as their happiest place. They struggle in heavy clay soils and very sandy soils. It's hard to grow them because they're always too dry. When you're choosing the layout of your field and where your strawberries go, we've learned the hard way not to plant them in the low spots. And that's for two reasons. And one is because frost in the spring is like a river, and it flows from the highest points down to the lowest points. And so the frost actually settles on the low areas and freezes your blossoms. Whereas if they were planted on the top of a hill, they would be fine. And the other thing is water. And strawberries absolutely despise having wet roots for very long. So if you have ground that's so soggy that you're sinking up to your ankles in it when you're walking, or active free water, your strawberries will surely perish. So that is another consideration. And access to labor is important. And it is such a high labor intensive crop that it's really great to be able to have people to help you out when you need it. And then generally, if you're thinking of having a U-pick and people coming to you as consumers, then not more than 2 turns off of a highway for your farm location. And so if it's an urban consumer, as soon as they get off pavement and onto gravel, they're starting to get concerned and they're really worried. And if they have to take 2 more turns, they're done. They just turn around and give up because they're unfamiliar territory, and Google Maps is good to a point, but as soon as it doesn't take them to the right place, then they just kind of don't know how to find you. So it's really important to have that good location. And of course, access to markets and customers. And living as we do, 25 minutes away from the urban metro area of Edmonton, we have access to 1.2 million potential consumers. And by no means do they all come out to the farm. It's like a very low percentage of maybe 1 or 2%, but that's all we need. As long as you have somewhat of an urban situation that people can't grow their own and we're willing to come to you, that's great. So on great soil, to dive in a little deeper, that sandy loam is perfect. So well drained, but with good nutritional qualities. The pH should be between 5.5 and 7.5, and your pH is your level of acidity versus alkalinity. And so if it's below 7, it's acidic soil, and if it's 7, it's neutral, and if it's 7.5 or above, then you're getting into alkaline soil. And strawberries like to live right in the middle of that. Your organic matter should be fairly good at 2 to 4%. And again, those wet spots and low areas should be avoided. The other thing to know is you should not plant strawberries where other crops before them have lived in that field. And so alfalfa, raspberries, tomatoes, and thistles or quackgrass. And we'll talk more about thistles and quackgrass, but alfalfa, raspberries, and tomatoes all host diseases which also affect strawberries, and also insects that also go after the strawberry blossoms. And so therefore it's quite worthwhile not to have those crops planted close by or the year prior. So we'd like to develop a microclimate for our strawberries, and the good shelter belts and windbreaks to reduce the wind are pretty important. And so you'll see in the background there's a row of poplar tree, but then in the middle of the rows there's a row of corn. And sunflowers also work really well and make for a pretty farm and good photos for Instagram. So that's something you can consider doing. And the reason for it is just you want to reduce the wind speed over the plants so that they can just grow and not have to fight for their toehold. And so in all the fruit crops, windbreaks and shelter belts are a really good investment. So there's nothing that we do with strawberries that doesn't involve handwork, and whether it's weeding or planting or picking or renovation and looking after them for the winter, it takes a human to actually do something out there in the field. And so here we are planting our strawberries with a strawberry planter. And we've got one person on the tractor, two people on the planter. And then what you don't see is there's a third person trailing behind, making sure that every single plant is planted properly and at the right depth. So at a minimum, you need 4 people for a crew, and quite often we'll have 6 people, and then we can go a little faster with the transplanter because we've got several people following behind to make sure they're set in properly. So when we invite you pickers out to our farm, they are agri-tourists, and we do need liability insurance for that. And we get our insurance from a company called ACERA out of Kelowna in BC, and they're very familiar with liability for agritourism operations, and they understand what the U-pick industry is all about and know what they're insuring you for. And I can share that information after this show if you'd like to connect with them. And typically on a farm of our size, you would pay by your gross revenues. And so it's not overly expensive to get, but it's absolutely necessary. Other things you should consider is where are people going to park? And have you talked to your county or your municipality about the permits that you need? In our county of Sturgeon, we need to have a permit that allows us to have intensive agriculture to grow U-pick strawberries. And so that's what we have for them. You also need good signage for your farm and also for folks to find you. A website in this day and age is absolutely critical, and people will follow you on Facebook, but they want to check back to your website to see where you actually are and are you a legitimate business and how can they reach you and connect with you. Social platforms we use heavily and almost exclusively nowadays for marketing. So we'll use Facebook, Instagram, are 2 main ones, and then there are others such as YouTube and TikTok, which the younger generation really loves. We find that who we're marketing to mostly is parents, and grandparents, and grandparents especially are on Facebook, and parents are on Instagram, and teenagers are on TikTok. So that's what we've discovered so far. So I thought I'd pause again and see if there's any questions arising from any of that information, and see how you're doing.
And in order to get the juices flowing, we could potentially also run a poll.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, that sounds great.
Let's do that. So how about this one? So which type of strawberry are you most interested in growing?
Good. So on the types of strawberries, we're going to take a deep dive into that next. But there are two basic types that we grow commercially. And the first one is the summer berries or the June bears. And then the next one is the day neutrals, which are considered to be everbearers. In the early days, when we first started growing strawberries in Alberta, there hadn't been any real research done into what varieties would grow well here. And growers were growing varieties like Sanka Sangana and Fort Laramie, which are considered everbearing types. But they actually are very low in production. And so we've stayed away from those from a commercial standpoint, just because they really don't produce anywhere near what the
Want
June
me to go
bears
in
or
there
the
for
June
you?
eagles do.
Or you got it?
And alpine strawberries is something that we sell plats for because people are really quite interested in having ground covers and understories to permaculture guilds and in fruit forests, but it's they're so tiny that it's not something we grow commercially as well.
Awesome.
Okay.
Any other questions from the group? Dylan is not sure which type of strawberry, doesn't know enough about them yet. So, yep,
Okay.
completely understandable.
Very
Okay,
good.
on to the next slide.
Yeah. So with the Alberta Farm Fresh Producers Association, we've just been lucky enough to secure grant funding from the Jobs, Economy, and Trade. And part of that grant funding is going to build us a micro accreditation program, which is going to reflect quality assurance programming. And in an industry-wide perspective, it's really important that we observe the safety standards and that nothing untoward happens to our strawberries in terms of how we produce them. And the absolute worst case scenario is you have a crop recall, which you've seen, I'm sure, strawberries on recall, or lettuce, or there's all of those crops, and it's absolutely devastating to the industry because people get afraid and they stop buying from everybody, not just the one place that maybe had some sort of an impact. So the quality assurance program and doing everything at the highest standard, so to make sure that our customers really enjoy them, is critical. In terms of where we see the industry growing, for domestic growth, we see that there is a lot of unmet demand for strawberries. And I know myself, in the season when our strawberries come on, we say yes to probably only 20% of the people who would actually like to come out to the farm and pick strawberries. And so there is a lot of room there for people to, other growers to share the the market. But what we do help with is trying to strengthen partnerships with both retailers and distributors, and leverage targeted marketing strategies to increase both your brand and our Alberta Farm Fresh brand visibility, so that we get locals buying our strawberries. And I can't think of a year that there is more opportunity than there is this year. Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation just 2 days ago announced an Alberta Buy Local program, and really focusing in on trying to support those local farms to offset tariffs. And we're very excited to see how much interest there is and how much people care about their local farms and supporting them. We also look at, surprisingly, international markets, and not that we're exporting strawberries, but we're exporting tourism experiences. And so we collaborate with Travel Alberta and regional destination marketing organizations like Explore Edmonton, for example, just to identify the opportunities in the global markets. And what we've discovered is in the European markets, in Germany and Denmark, they have strawberries, of course, in their regions, but there's a lot of RVers, and they're really interested in driving to places off the beaten track and really keen to taste what food tastes like coming from our lands. And so that's that taste of place and the sense of place is a very key experience to international guests, and it's something that you may have not even thought of. And so we are exploring those markets with the AFFPA. And also new products. We're investing over $300,000 in the next 3 years to diversify portfolios of farms to meet the emerging consumer trends. So whether that's a value-added item, like they would like to not only buy the strawberries, but a jar of jam to take home for their as a gift or a souvenir from the farm. We're going to be collaborating with other agricultural experts as we create products that offer unique flavors, nutrition, and environmental resilience as part of our overall strategy. So now a deep dive into the varieties. And I'll start first with the day neutral strawberries. And what we find is that they produce flowers and then fruit, and then they reset flowers and then fruit. So you see oftentimes red fruit and white strawberries blossoms at the same time, as well as green fruit. And a flower on a strawberry takes pretty near exactly a month from the flower to the red fruit. And so it really gives you a good indicator of where your crop is and where it's coming along to. And those half white strawberries are 2 weeks away from being pickable. So it gives you a good sense of it. So Seascape is the earliest variety. And it's been around in Alberta, probably one of the longest types. And because it's shown that it's quite reliable, it's very productive, and it's quite hardy for the winter. And what happens to day neutral strawberries is because they don't rely on day length to set up their flower buds, they produce a little bit when you first plant them. So those first wave of blossoms comes on, and then you pick those, and then another whole wave of blossoms will come, and then you'll have a lot of strawberries later in the season. And so starting kind of late August into September and all the way through October, you'll have a lot of strawberries to harvest. So Seascape is the #1 variety that we sell plants to commercial growers for through the association across Alberta. Monterey is a new and upcoming variety. So we're starting just to experiment with that one in the last 2 or 3 years. And the beauty of it is that it's mid-season. So the Seascape start the quickest, and the Monterey start flushing a little bit later. And it puts it nicely in between the Seascape and the Albion. And the berry size is really nice on them, and the flavor is good. These berries generally tend to be fairly strong berries, so they're not super soft, so they're really good berries to use to sell at farmers markets or where you travel to, and yet they're still ripe. You pick them ripe and they have the beautiful flavor. Albion is the last variety that we tend to really promote as a commercial crop variety, and it is actually an improved variety of Seascape, and it's a little bit later, so the berries are bigger, and they actually taste a little bit better than the Seascape do, and it gives you that third wave of strawberries. So if you combine all three, then you have these day neutrals producing at slightly different times in your field, so your production never kind of goes, yes, we have lots, and then no, we don't have much. They just keep percolating along with, you've got people that can have strawberries every week. Then we get into the summer bearers or the June bearers. And in Nova Scotia, they would most certainly be June bearing strawberries. But in Alberta, like I say, it's a bit later. Brunswick is a new variety that we're working with, and it is the earliest one. So it gives us strawberries a good week and a half earlier than Honeoye. So it just starts to spread out your season a little bit. When they come on, there's so many at one time that if you're just getting started, you might wish you'd spread your crop out a little bit so that you didn't have to find quite so many people prepared to come and pick their own berries that week. So the Brunswick gives you that little elbow shoulder season a little bit ahead of it. They're a little higher risk than the rest of them because they bloom a little bit earlier too, so you might lose them occasionally to those late spring frosts. Honeoye is the next variety that is still considered an early one, but not as early as the others, and not as late as the others, so in the middle somewhere. The cool thing about honeoye is, and if you look at the one berry, it has a white tip on it. And so that's how they ripen from the calyx, which is the green stem and the leaves on the shoulder of the berry, to the tip of the berry. And when they have that white tip, they're exactly 3 days away from being ready to pick. And it's an easy way for the consumer to understand when they're out picking that if they have a white tip, they're not sweet, not as sweet as they will be if you let them turn fully ripe. Whereas the other berries tend to kind of drift from orange to red. These are the only ones that have that little indicator tip on the berry itself. Then they are a very beautiful berry. They produce with seeds kind of inset, so they look very glossy, and they have a distinct flavor of honey to them. But on sandy soils, they can be bitter. So if you have sandy soils, stay away from honeoye. It's one of our favorite varieties, and it does very well here on our land. Cavendish is the next variety to look at, and they have tremendously high yields, higher than honeoye and Brunswick, and very large berries. And if they don't get picked right away, they kind of go from orange to red and then to a really dark, almost purpley red. And they taste wonderful, and they really make nice shortcakes and strawberry jam. So they're considered an early mid-season, so kind of bridging the gap between the earlies and the mid-season ones. Then we've got three others. Kent is the absolute #1 all-time favorite of all strawberry growers across the province. And so if you planted nothing but Kent, you would be fine. And they are delicious. They have that true strawberry flavor that people just can't get enough of. And they're very, very productive. So you easily average between 10 and 15,000 pounds an acre and higher on those ones if you've got a good year. AAC Lila is a new introduction, and it's going to be before the Kent is and after the Cavendish. So again, that just another few rows of something coming into production at a slightly different sequence, and a nice big berry and a good flavor. And then Mira comes after. So Kent flushes out. In our case, we're in peak season here, always July the 20th. And then by July the 27th, the Mira kick in. And so it gives you another flush a bit later. And also very nice berry that's very consistent. And again, one that ripens from orange to red and then to deep, deep red. So considered a mid-season one. Then we get into the late strawberries, and this is all kind of new country for us. We started experimenting with these about 5 or 6 years ago and started with AC Valley Sunset. And that strawberry is a good week and a half after the Kents are done. And so there's no more Kents to pick, and these ones are just orange and just about turning red. And then the next week they come into full production. So about the 7th of August in our case is when we start to see them. And the berry size is amazing. The king berries, which are the first berries on the cluster, are literally almost double the size of some of the Kents. And they have an interesting sort of pineapple-y flavor. So it's not everybody's favorite, but it is a good, really good solid strawberry. And of late, we've been growing Cabot, which is the latest of the strawberries. And because it's so late, we don't see a red strawberry from them until August 15th. So getting really super late and huge berries. And often, people will say these are like apples when they're out there picking. They don't produce as many berries as some of the Kents and things do, but because the berry size is so large, it only takes 25 or 30 berries to fill a 4-liter pail, whereas it takes 50 berries to fill a 4-liter pail of the Kents. So truly impressive. And if you wanted a strawberry for chocolate dipping and you were selling a value-added product, Cabot would be a good addition to your crop lineup. So pretty thrilled with those. And the flavor is excellent. So stopping again for a few questions, if there's any thoughts as to which ones you might like to try now you know a bit more. What we find is we plant a lot more of the day neutrals in an acre than we plant of the June bearers, just because they're not runnering like the other ones are. And It's good to see both varieties in the field because it gives you that extended season. And you come into strawberries maybe the first week of July, and then you have strawberries all the way through until October. You have a reason for people to come and visit you the whole way through. So now we'll check your what you think again on this one, on this poll. But we have found that we mostly grow June bearers nowadays, but we have some of those day neutrals to fill the back end of the season. And when we first started, we grew the day neutrals because we needed cash flow right away. And that's what they do. They come into production that first year that you plant them, and you're already putting money in the bank on that first season. So it definitely is a great addition to a strawberry crop. Okay, there
I
you
have
go.
Tammy that is asking a question. Are you using ground cover to control weeds?
Um, yes, and no. There's and we'll talk about mulches a little bit coming up, but it is a good question. And what we do is we put straw on the strawberries, and that's why they get their names, it's the straw, to protect the flower buds in the winter. And the June-bearing strawberries actually do set up their flowers on short days in the fall. And so in September and October, they've already got all of their flower buds set for next spring in that crown, and in that crown of the plant. And we make sure about the first week of November, when we're seeing kind of average temperatures of around 0 or just slightly below, that's when to put the straw on, and we cover them about 6 inches deep. And that straw actually insulates those strawberry blossoms. So without the straw, you lose about half of your crop. So another thing you absolutely have to invest in is the straw mulching for the winter protection. And then it has the sort of added side benefit, because you pull it off in the spring, but you leave it in the aisles between the rows of potentially reducing the wheat population, although straw does bring its own population in of wheat and whatnot. But it does keep the berries off the dirt, off the soil, and soil is where the soil-borne diseases come from. And if you see soft rots or fuzzy mold sometimes, or botrytis in strawberries, that is what we see as the culprit is the soil. So really good to get it underneath the flower clusters, and we'll actually, when we're weeding, pull it under the flower clusters so they're high and dry, and you get a much higher quality fruit.
Thank you. And the next question, these are more varieties than I am used to seeing. Are they in most greenhouses?
I think it depends on the level of grower. Most places feel pretty comfortable offering Kent, and probably a seascape variety. These other ones are quite specialized, and we source them through the association, and they are hard to find. So we, as the association, actually import them if they're day neutrals from California, and do all of that paperwork that's required, and the phytosanitation certificates and the bulk orders, so that we get good freight prices. Or we coordinate the orders from Nova Scotia, so we're able to, bring some of those lesser known varieties in, and have our growers trial them and see where they find they work well for them. And every strawberry grows a little bit different in everybody's farm. And so some growers will love honeoy like us, and other growers won't plant them. So it's a little bit of experimenting, always, just to see how it settles out on your location and on your soil and with your growth, and looking after them practices.
Thank you. The next question, how do you prevent robins and birds from eating berries?
That's such a good question. And when we first got started, we really found that the robins and the crows, in our case, come and steal the berries. And so if you have a very small garden in a small yard, they'll come and take a bite out of every one. And it's so disappointing because they know just when they're not quite ripe, but ripe enough to eat. But once you get a bigger acreage planted, so if we plant an acre or 2 acres of strawberries. Oddly, they seem like they just leave them alone. And maybe it's because we joke and laugh and say we plant an extra row for the robins. And it's probably true, they do eat their fair share, but there's enough people out there picking, so too many humans around for the birds to feel comfortable coming in. And so that's one thing we do. The second thing is there's a couple of items that you can purchase to protect your crop. And one of them is a kind of a magnetic silver tape, and it's called bird scare tape. And you pull it tight in between a couple of stakes and put it right over the row. And it's silver, so it kind of reflects light, which scares birds off to some degree. But when the breeze comes through, it hums and it sounds like a bird of prey swooping in from overhead, and it scares the birds out of the patch. And because it's relying on wind, it doesn't make it all the time, so it is actually quite effective. And the other is you can buy something called a scare eye, which looks like a big beach ball when it's red and yellow, and it looks like an eye of a bird. And again, it's to emulate that bird of prey. And the little birds are scared of a big bird overhead, so that's another great way to keep the birds out of the berry patch.
Thank you so much. And there is no question at this moment.
So, planting season has arrived. So again, using that virus index certified stock is super important. And we do plow our plants under every 3 to 5 years, depending on what their productivity is like and how our battle with the weeds is going. When you space them on your field, typically we space our strawberries 12 inches apart, or 0.3 of a meter if you like, so about 18 inches on the June bearers, and between 10 and 12 inches apart on the day neutrals. And so in your rows, that means depending on how you space your rows out, you'll get between 10,000 and 12,000 plants in an acre, and more if they're day neutrals. And the row spacing really depends on your own farm and what tractors you're using and what equipment you're using in between the rows to cultivate. And at one time, we used to plant them quite close together, kind of at 4 to 5 feet apart. And I would say now we've gone to a little wider spacing just because I have a bit bigger equipment nowadays. And I still like to be able to get into it. If I cannot get in between the rows with any equipment, absolutely lose the battle with the weeds. And so you have to always have that in the back of your mind. There are mechanical transplanters like the one you see in this picture, which can really make a big difference in the planting season, because you can sit on that transplanter and plant an acre a day. And so we find we plant at least between 10 and 12,000 plants every day when we're planting. And it takes us 2 or 3 days to plant 2 or 3 acres of strawberries. But if you had to do it by hand, that is a big job, and that would take you weeks and weeks to do. So I find that we like to use these mechanical transplanters. And you see on this one, there's the yellow tank. And so what it's doing is filling a little bit of water so that you immediately water those plants. This is kind of dry soil, and you've got to water them right away within 24 hours. So, and then on your day neutrals, you're going to just plant them especially a little tighter in the rows. With the June bearers, when they're finished growing and all their daughter plants are in, it's called a matted row system. And you'll have a plant every 4 inches. So about the width of your hand is how far you're spacing those little plants on their daughter runners. And so when you're finished, your row is going to be about 25 or 30 inches wide. And that is a row that somebody, if they're picking, can't reach across. So then when you set your people down the rows, they pick one side of the row and then come back and pick the other side of the row coming home, usually. So what to do with your plants before you plant them. So if you get bare root plants like we do, they're coming in cases of 1,000 or 1,500, and sometimes they're bundled up like this in 25s. They're frozen when they arrive. So they've been dug and frozen and kept at like -5 through the winter. And Nova Scotian plants tend to come to us looking a little bit green like this, and the California plants hardly any green leaves at all. So the best thing you can do if you can't get to it right away is keep them cool. So we put ours in the cooler, where we keep it at like 0.5 to 1 degree and not warmer than 3 degrees because they start to get moldy if they're hanging out in a warm space. Um, if they're in a case, they're all wrapped nicely in plastic so they don't dry out. But once you go out into the field to plant, we take them all out of the cases and line them up on trays so we can easily pick them as we're putting them into the strawberry planter. And it's critical not to let them dry out in that phase. And so we bundle them all up into the flats, and we put the flats back in the box and wrap them back up with the plastic so they're not sitting in the hot, windy, sunny days of planting spring weather. And if we bring more plants than we need that we can plant in 1 or 2 rows, then we put those plants under tarps or in the shade or inside the box of a truck so that they're out of the sun so they don't start to heat, leaving them in the back of the truck. So those things really make a difference on quality when you're out. When you start thinking about planting strawberries and you're back to the site selection, for new planting, I always like to summer follow a field and make sure I've absolutely killed all of those perennial weeds like quackgrass and thistles. And so we'll start with disking, and then we'll just keep that field clean and we don't let the weeds set seed the year before. So a very important part of getting strawberries going is to actually do that summer following the year before. And then if you do have thistles or quackgrass crop up, you can do some spot spraying with Roundup, or you can just keep after it. And cultivate is much better than rototilling, and much better than disking actually, because both of them are growing underground and making rhizomes. And so if you rototill them or you disc them, you're actually taking cuttings and spreading them around under there. So a cultivator with the shoe just cuts them off and flips them out onto the top and dries them out. So you will lose the battle with the weeds if you don't do the control. So the key points on the weed control is to reduce that perennial weed pressure before you even plant strawberries. And if you plant into a field that you know is going to be full of annual weed seed, it's really going to be an uphill battle. And I've heard many a tale of growers that think they can do it, and they plant the strawberries, and then they kind of get started, and oh, look at that, the strawberries are rooting in, and you start to see the little green leaves pop up. And then they get busy on the rest of the farm doing other things, and then they come back, and literally from the time you see a weed that's only 1/4 of an inch high to the time it's 10 inches tall is about 10 days. And so you come back to the field and you're sad to see that you can no longer see the strawberries even. And sometimes, I've heard growers say, I just couldn't do it, and I plowed them under. But it's, that clean ground makes it much easier. So we typically use physical, cultural, and not too much chemical control other than we do spot spray the thistles. So for physical control and cultural control, so the cultural is the summer following. The physical is to get out there and cultivate in between the rows. And so we've developed a few pieces of equipment that, either will go over top of the row with a cultivator shank. We've somehow stumbled across a tractor at some point that has undercarriage cultivators to it, so that makes it easier. And then we also purchased a machine called a Reggie weeder, which I unfortunately didn't have a slide of, but it's a rotary tine weeder. And when you first plant the plants, you can get quite close, and it has a spinning set of wheels with these tines that stick down, and they're really effective at taking care of little small weeds before the plants start to runner. And once they start to runner, you can't use it anymore because it catches the runners and pulls the plants out of the ground. But the Reggie weeder was a great invention. Um, the type of weed control that you're doing really depends on the time of the season and your production system. So if you're doing June bearers versus day neutrals, and if you're going organic versus conventional production, quite a few growers put day neutrals onto plastic mulch, and you'll see that a lot in the photos. And because you're not interested in necessarily setting runners, they do very, very well on it's called plastic culture or plastic mulch, and you can purchase biodegradable plastic. So when you're done, it over time converts itself back to the soil. A note about herbicides, and if you are going conventionally, you can only use herbicides that have strawberries registered for use on the label, and only at appropriate times in the growth cycle. Or you can invest in some spot spraying from time to time. But that on-label use is critical when you're selling fruit to people who are going to consume it. So you must destroy all perennial weeds before you plant. That's my best advice for you. And you see the quackgrass coming up in between the straw quite gleefully in this field. And, you know, you can mow it, you can hoe it, you can not till it because your strawberries are there, and you can bury it in straw, but it sure is difficult to get rid of. And you see it spreads underground with these rhizomes, and I think I've read that it spreads up to 25, 30 feet in a season. And my husband said, no, that's not true, but it sure does spread a long ways and fast. So quackgrass is your nemesis out there, as are thistles. And thistles are even worse because the consumer doesn't like to pick in a prickly strawberry patch. And if you weed them out, then they're dry thistles and they get stuck in people's fingers when they're picking. And there's, those folks that always come in their flip-flops to pick strawberries, and they don't like thistles either. So the thistles, again, just so important to control them before your season, before you plant in that field ever. So another little pause for any questions, if anybody has anything at this point. Do you have a poll, Catherine?
Well, let me see.
Are you thinking maybe of, depends on what you're thinking of. If you're thinking of growing organically versus through conventional means, it's interesting to know.
Here's the poll for you. Which production approach are you leaning towards? Okay, it's 50-50 so far.
We partnered with the organic growers this spring at our spring conference, and there really are some innovative technologies coming along for organic growers. And we spoke to a couple of different suppliers that had developed drones for weeding, and they were using laser beams, and they had, spent some time in developing the software for these drones so they could recognize all the different plants that were underneath, and they actually could target and laser out the weeds on the strawberry production. So that was an interesting thing.
Do you remember the company that was promoting a coconut husk mulch? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think it's probably too expensive to use on a big scale, but it would sure work well in a home garden. And we find we like to use straw because it's readily available, and we also grow wheat, so we have access to straw easily. But beside that, there's some growers that use wood chips as mulch. And they've had tremendous success with that over the years. At some point, everything gets turned back into the soil and as organic matter. Straw is something that breaks down a little easier and quicker than wood chips does. Wood chips take a long time to compost in the soil, and they pull nitrogen away as they go. So that's a harder thing. I know that Blaine at the Jungle Farm sells the plastic mulch, and I've discovered just recently in my 40 years that Sturgeon County rents the machinery so that you can actually apply the plastic mulch. So and they use it for their shelter belt program, but it's possible to rent it quite inexpensively. And you can buy rolls of plastic from them too, and use that as a mulch if you wanted to experiment a little bit.
Oh, thank you. And I received a question through via email from someone that wasn't able to make it tonight. How can growers accurately assess the nutrient demands of strawberries at different stages?
Ah, that's a good question. Yeah, so we would recommend, of course, starting the season by testing your soil to see what you're starting with. And then I actually do have a slide in here for that. But as the season progresses, they use different nutrients to do different things for the plant. And so foliar leaf testing is a very accurate way to know exactly at the moment in your strawberry crop what's happening. And it's a very useful tool if you're seeing micronutrient deficiencies or tip burning or chlorosis in the leaves, so you know what's going wrong so you can solve it. So definitely worthwhile if you're having problems with your crop.
Thank you. Any other question? Any other questions, everyone? Up, Caitlin, is there a company in Alberta that sells the bigger equipment, 3-point hitch attachments for transplanting strawberries?
Hmm. Um, I think yes, the answer is yes to that. Mechanical transplanters are available from a company in Thorsby called Northern Equipment, I believe. And it's Dave and Monica Turta that run that company, and they also sell all of the parts because inevitably they wear out and you have to get parts for them. Otherwise, we source equipment from Ontario, and there is a company out there that sells Reggie weeders and potato planters for small scale farms, and they often drive through and do deliveries to Alberta once a year, so you can get on a pooled shipment for that kind of equipment. And then we find just generally in southern Alberta, there's so much row cropping going on in that part of the world. And so down in Vauxhall and Tabor, because of the corn crops and potato crops, oftentimes there are lots of machines that work well for inter-row cropping in strawberries, and you just have to adapt.
Thank you. Shall we move on to the next slide?
Very good. Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, sustainable growing practices are something that we're committed to and that most of our farms are committed to, and the association itself is committed to. And we're looking to minimize environmental impacts. We'd like to conserve our natural resources and our water and promote biodiversity where we can. And we employ techniques such as crop rotation, integrated pest management, and precision agriculture to ensure that we are long-term viable in our farming practices. So on fertility management, here is that slide for you that just shows what the strawberry plants are up to, nitrogen uptake. And so on the 10th of January, they're asleep and they're not doing too much. By the time April comes around, they're starting to grow and they're starting to use some nitrogen. And then by June, it's definitely they're very active and they're running and they're producing fruit. And by August is when we do something called renovation. And so once the berry picking is done, especially on the June bearing crops, not so much the day neutrals, we'll actually mow the strawberries off. And at this time, we'll also rototill in between the rows and put all the straw back into the soil, and we'll narrow down the rows and make it so that there's new places for the new runners to come, which is your crop for next year. And between August and October is when you've got the highest nitrogen uptake that the plants use. And so that's, when you should be really watching for what is going on with your plants. At renovation, typically is the best time to apply some type of fertilizer, and it could be conventional or it could be compost and organic. This is a slide of someone's converted their granular soil fertilizer spreader to actually spread compost over the crop, which I thought was pretty clever. But when you first start out and you have your soil test, the optimum range of nitrogen is 17 to 22 kilograms per hectare as actual nitrogen. And so if your soil test comes in lower than that, you can add more. And it's usually a balance of what you're actually applying. And so the nitrogen is the part that gets the green leaves growing and the runners. But you don't want to overdo it with nitrogen at the wrong time, because if you get too much green growth and too much foliage over the top, then your berries are going to suffer from lack of light and probably more likely to succumb to soil funguses and botrytis and those sorts of things. So if you're actually looking at your soil test result, and I just have one in my hand here, and it said that your nitrogen content of your soil was 5 to 9 kilograms per hectare, then you would want to add, 130 to 120 kilograms per hectare of actual nitrogen. And so if you look at a fertilizer concentration, whether it be compost or a conventional fertilizer, it always gives you the numbers in terms of percentages. And so you would see, like in a compost, it would be a 703 or something. And on a conventional fertilizer, it might be 18, 18, 18. And so those are showing you what percentage of actual nutrients are in that formulation. And so at 18, it's 18% nitrogen. And so you do a little calculation that says if you had a pound of fertilizer and only 18% of it was actually nitrogen, then you can work out how many actual kilograms of nitrogen you need in terms of the product on your field. And the same for phosphorus and potassium. So nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are your three key ingredients for growing a good crop of strawberries. And that is what we pay the most attention to. Our soils typically have enough potassium here. So very often we have 0 potassium required. And phosphorus is the thing that builds roots and fruits. And so that is something that we apply in the soil at planting time, because it does not move in the soil once it's there. So if you sprinkle it on the top and water it, it doesn't move down into the root zone. So you got to get that on at planting time. The use of mulching is a good piece for the strawberry part, and this is a plastic mulch on the bottom slide photo here going in, and there's that multiplier. Or we use straw, and so we've done both. We've had the old-fashioned that we built ourselves bale buster. We busted square bales right over top of the rows, and now my husband's invested in a bigger bale buster on the bigger tractor. So now we do 10 rows at a time, and it's much quicker. And we use round bales instead of square bales. And then this was just a slide I found that I thought was so interesting to show the different results in the different years of how much more or less your strawberry production went up. And if you use straw, that is basically the highest that they found in this particular study in terms of yield improvement. And that's because you're protecting those flower buds in the wintertime. And the black mulch is also effective, but probably more so on the day neutrals, because it speeds them up a little bit and you get more crop production earlier before the frosts. Irrigation, again, a very critical piece of strawberry growing. And drip lines are a very effective way of putting water right where your plants are. And there are grants available through SGAP for big drip line irrigation projects. Or you can, if you have a bigger source of water, go with the sprinkler system, whether it's a solid set or a moving set. But basically, your 2 times are when you plant them, you have to water them within 24 hours. And then you need to keep moisture at the 74% range when your new berries are getting established, which kind of means if you grab some soil and squish it in your hand, it holds a clump and it doesn't just crumble and fall away again. If actual water rings out and drips out of it, it's too wet. Just wanted to say that the Alberta Farm Fresh Producers Association has really been valuable to us over our 40-year career in growing strawberries and agritourism. And we've successfully managed to help lobby to have Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation launch just 2 days ago, an Alberta Buy Local program. And so we're really deeply rooted in our communities, and we advocate for our growers and actively engage with all of our stakeholders to support education initiatives and to contribute to our community development to foster positive economic impact and social impact. So I think we'll just flip past that. And there are some upcoming webinars that we are hosting on that line of thought, furthering the masterclass in strawberries. On June 11th, we have a Strawberry Masterclass on marketing the strawberries and also what to do with your plants through the bloom and early fruit set season, right when you need to know about that. And August 6th, another Strawberry Masterclass on post-harvest strawberry production. So what do you do with those plants when your season is done and you're going to renovate? And October 8th, a Strawberry Masterclass on winter planning, how to source equipment and where to find it and what equipment you need, and how to get your plant order in with the association. So you've got some plants coming for the 2026 growing season.
Thank you so much, Tam. Any additional questions? You have been a fabulous presenter, and we had a fabulous participants. Since we are almost out of time, I am going to thank everyone for joining us tonight. It's been a real pleasure having you here for the first session of our Alberta Strawberry Masterclass. We hope you found it valuable, inspiring, and filled with ideas you can bring back to your own growing journey. A recording of tonight's session will be sent to your inbox tomorrow, so don't worry if you miss anything, we've got you covered. And one last thing before we go, I have one last question for you. And we would love to hear your feedback. Please take a moment to fill out the quick rating poll that just popped up. It helps us shape future sessions and keep improving this series. On behalf of Tam, myself, and the whole team at Alberta Farm Fresh Producers, thanks again, and we'll see you at the next session.
Good. And I put my contact information there for everyone. So if you have a question and you'd like to reach out by email or even give me a phone call, I'm happy to help you out and share what I know. So thanks so much for joining us for this evening, everyone. And good luck out there in the planning of your next strawberry crop.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.